The night was colder than usual, and the wind carried strange sounds down from the mountains. Dr. Aaron sat at his small wooden desk, trying to read, but he could not focus. Something outside was calling him. At first, he thought it was only the wind brushing against the cliffs. But then he stopped, listening more carefully. The sound came again, low and heavy. It was not the cry of a wolf, not the scream of an owl, not the howl of any creature he knew. It was deep, broken, and filled with sadness. It almost sounded like sobbing. Aaron stood up slowly, his heart beating harder. He grabbed his lantern and stepped outside. The night air bit into his skin, but the strange sound made him forget the cold. It echoed across the valley, coming from the dark path that led into the mountains. He hesitated for a moment. He knew the mountains were dangerous. People whispered about beasts that lived there, ancient creatures with wings and fire. But something inside him told him he could not ignore this sound. With each step, the cry grew louder. It was like listening to a giant heart breaking. His boots crunched over the stones, his lantern light dancing across rocks and dead branches. The forest around him felt alive, as if every tree leaned closer to listen. He whispered to himself, "What is it? What could make such a sound?" Then he stopped. Ahead, at the edge of the clearing, something moved. A shadow, bigger than any he had ever seen, stretched across the ground. The moon slipped out from behind a cloud, and Aaron froze. There, standing tall and terrible, was a dragon. Its scales shimmered faintly under the moonlight, reflecting green and gold like burning embers. Its wings were folded, but even folded they looked larger than a house. Its eyes were wet, glowing softly, and Aaron realized with shock that the sound he had been hearing, the broken, painful sobs, was coming from this mighty creature. Aaron wanted to run. His body screamed for him to turn back, to escape before those glowing eyes turned toward him. But his feet would not move. He had studied creatures for years, but never had he seen one like this so close, and never had he imagined he would see a dragon. Weeping. The dragon moved forward slowly, and Aaron saw she was not alone. Clutched gently in her massive claws was something smaller. She bent her great neck, lowering the bundle to the ground. The lantern light revealed it clearly, a young cub, a baby dragon. Its chest rose weakly, its eyes half closed, its scales dull like fading embers. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. The mother dragon pushed the cub closer to him, her golden eyes filled with desperation. She did not roar. She did not breathe fire. She only looked at him, pleading, as if begging him to do something. Aaron's mind spun. This was impossible. Dragons were said to hate humans. They were killers, monsters in every story. And yet, here she was, lowering her dying child in front of him, asking for help. His hands shook as he crouched beside the cub. He could hear its shallow breathing, each gasp weaker than the last. The baby dragon was dying. Aaron touched its chest gently, feeling the uneven rhythm of its tiny heart. He swallowed hard, looking up at the mother. You want me to save it?" His voice was barely a whisper, trembling with both fear and wonder. The dragon blinked slowly, as if answering. Her tears fell onto the ground, steaming as they touched the cold earth. Aaron's mind screamed that this was madness. He should turn and run before the mother changed her mind and tore him apart. But another voice inside him whispered louder, "If you do nothing, this creature will die." His lantern flickered, casting shadows on the trees. But Aaron did not notice any more. All he could see was the small body in front of him and the great beast watching silently, her hope resting entirely on him. He had never felt such pressure, such weight on his shoulders. The night around him grew quieter, as if the whole world was holding its breath, waiting for his choice. And as Aaron knelt beside the weak cub, he realized something. This was no ordinary night. This was the night when a human and a dragon would face each other not as enemies, but as desperate beings bound by the same fear, the fear of losing someone they loved. His heart beat fast, his thoughts spun wildly, but his hands reached for his bag anyway. He could not promise success. He did not even know if human knowledge could help such a creature. But he knew one thing. He had to try. Aaron looked up once, more into the glowing eyes of the weeping dragon, and nodded slowly. "I'll try," he whispered. "I'll try to save your child." The dragon lowered her head in silence, her breath warm against him, her massive body trembling with hope and fear. The cub gasped again, its chest struggling. Aaron set his lantern. Down beside them, the light glowing over the most impossible scene of his life: a human, a dragon, and a dying cub. And in that fragile moment, the night seemed to bend, waiting for what would happen next. The cabin was small and quiet, but inside it felt like a storm was raging. Aaron paced back and forth, his lantern shaking, in his hand, throwing long shadows across the wooden walls. The cub lay on a blanket near the fire, its breath shallow, its chest rising and falling like it was climbing a mountain with every breath. Outside, the ground trembled softly. The mother dragon was still there. She hadn't left. Her huge, golden eyes peered in through the window, unblinking, watching every move Aaron made. He had seen many strange things in his life as a field researcher, but nothing like this. A dragon, one of the most feared creatures on the planet, had come to him not to fight, but to beg. He could still feel her eyes on him, filled with a pain so sharp it pierced through her scales and fire. She hadn't spoken, not with words, but her actions had screamed louder than any voice. "Save my child." Aaron knelt beside the cub again. The little dragon's chest rattled with each gasp, like air was struggling to stay inside. Its wings twitched weakly, its eyes half closed. Aaron leaned close, pressing his ear to its chest. His stomach tightened. He recognized the sound, a struggle in the lungs. They weren't working right. "This isn't just sickness," Aaron muttered to himself. It's breaking from the inside." The mother dragon shifted outside, her shadow passing over the cabin walls. Aaron's hands trembled. He knew the rules. The galactic law was clear. No human was allowed to interfere with non-human life. It was called the Non-Intervention Code. The punishment for breaking it was swift and cruel. He had read stories of researchers erased from existence for doing far less than this. But when he looked down at the cub, all those rules felt far away, like dusty words in some forgotten book. This wasn't about politics or laws. This was about life and death. He swallowed hard. "If I don't try, it won't survive the night." His own words echoed in the tiny cabin, heavy and final. He could not undo them now. He had already made his choice. Aaron reached into his bag, pulling out a stethoscope, oxygen mask, and the few medical tools he kept for emergencies. His fingers fumbled as he tried to fit the mask over the cub's snout, adjusting the straps that were far too small. The cub whimpered weakly, a pitiful sound that cut through him like a knife. "Easy, easy now," he whispered as though the little dragon could understand him. He pumped oxygen into the mask, but the cub's chest barely moved. Too weak, too fragile. Aaron bit his lip. Human tools weren't built for creatures like this. His mind raced with calculations, possibilities, risks. Could he adapt human methods to alien biology? Could he even try without killing it faster? He glanced toward the window. The mother dragon's glowing eyes never left him. Her body pressed closer to the cabin, making the wood groan under her weight. If he failed, she would know. If he gave up, she would know. But something strange happened. She didn't growl, didn't roar. She lowered her massive head to the ground, her chin almost touching the dirt, like a bow. It was not a threat. It was surrender. A silent plea. "I trust you, human." Aaron's chest tightened. He wasn't a hero. He wasn't a doctor for creatures like this. He was just a man with knowledge and shaky hands. But for the first time in his life, he felt something larger than fear. He felt chosen. The cub coughed again, a dry, rattling sound, and Aaron snapped back into action. He checked the lungs, pressed lightly against the chest, watched the rhythm. His face grew pale. "Your body is shutting down," he whispered to the cub, though he knew it couldn't hear him. "If I don't find a way soon, you'll be gone." The mother dragon's tail scraped against the earth outside, the sound like thunder rolling over the cabin. She was restless, desperate. Her massive breath fogged the glass of the window. Aaron looked between them, mother and child, and his decision carved itself into his heart like stone. There would be no running, no pretending he didn't see. "I'll do it," he said firmly, more to himself than to anyone else. "I'll try to save you, no matter the cost." The cub's breathing hitched again, weaker than before. Aaron's eyes hardened. He could not rely only on human medicine. He would need something more, something new. His mind began to spin with ideas. Machines, synthetic parts, systems that could replace what the cub had lost. It sounded impossible, even insane. But then again, wasn't that what history remembered? The impossible moments. The insane choices. The ones where humans reached beyond their limits? Aaron pressed his hand against the cub's chest gently, whispering, "Hold on, I'll find a way." Outside, the mother dragon released a low, trembling sound, half growl, half sob, that shook the earth. She could not understand his words, but she seemed to feel them, to believe them. The night around them was silent again, but this time it was not the silence of fear. It was the silence of a promise. A human and a dragon bound by desperation, and in that fragile bond, Aaron knew something had already changed. This was no longer just a plea. This was a beginning. Aaron's cabin had never felt so small, so heavy with pressure. The little dragon cub lay on the table, its tiny chest fighting for every breath. Each gasp was weaker than the last, like a candle flickering against a storm. Aaron hovered over it, sweat sliding down his forehead, his hands shaking. He had treated injured hunters, sick travelers, even poisoned animals before, but never this. Never something not even meant for human hands. The mother dragon crouched just outside, her enormous shadow spilling across the walls whenever she shifted. Her golden eyes glowed through the window, unblinking, filled with a desperation that made Aaron's chest ache. She couldn't fit inside, but her presence pressed against the cabin like a mountain leaning on fragile wood. Every time the cub coughed, every time its chest stuttered, she let out a low guttural sound that made the earth tremble. It wasn't anger. It was grief waiting to erupt. Aaron forced himself to breathe. "Focus," he muttered under his breath. He pressed the stethoscope to the cub's chest again. The sound inside was horrifying, like broken machinery grinding against itself. The lungs weren't taking in enough air, and when they did, they leaked it back out in shallow bursts. "This isn't just sickness," Aaron whispered. "It's lungs. They're collapsing." The cub's tiny claws twitched, scraping weakly against the blanket. Aaron bit his lip. If he did nothing, the creature would be gone within the hour. He tried the oxygen mask again, but the cub jerked, rejecting it. The machine was too rough, too alien for its fragile body. Panic clawed at his mind. He didn't have the right tools, the right knowledge. This wasn't what humans were trained for. He slammed his hands on the table, teeth gritted. "Think, Aaron, think." His eyes darted to the shelves around the cabin. Scattered there were pieces of his past projects, half-built drones, broken filtration systems, scraps of synthetic tissue from experiments that had never worked out. To others it was junk, but to him it was potential. He turned back to the cub. Its breath rattled again, weaker, thinner. Time was running out. "No," Aaron whispered fiercely, his voice shaking but stubborn. "You are not dying here. Not tonight." The mother dragon's head lowered outside the window, her golden eye peering directly at him. Her gaze burned into him, demanding something more than failure. She didn't roar. She didn't move. She simply waited, her hope placed entirely in the hands of one fragile human. And that was when Aaron felt it, the shift inside him. The fear that had paralyzed him began to change into something sharper, determination. He couldn't save the cub with what he had now, but maybe, just maybe, he could build what it needed. An idea flickered to life in his mind. It was reckless, dangerous, untested, but it was the only chance. "I'll build you lungs," he whispered to the cub. "Artificial ones. A second chance to breathe." The words sounded insane even to him, but as soon as he said them, something inside clicked. He could see it in his mind, the framework, the filters, the pumping system. He had worked on air-purifying devices before, designed to survive toxic zones. If he could adapt that technology, reshape it for a living body, He rushed to the shelves, gathering wires, small pumps, synthetic membranes, anything he could find. Sparks flew as he fired up his old tools. His cabin filled with the smell of burning metal and solder. His hands worked fast, almost too fast, driven by fear and hope mixed together. Behind him, the cub let out a weak whimper. Aaron's chest tightened. He had no time. The line between life and death was growing thinner with every passing second. "Hold on," he muttered, his voice breaking as he worked. "Hold on for me." The mother dragon outside released a sound like a prayer, low and trembling. She could not see what he was doing, but she stayed. Her massive body curled protectively around the cabin, her presence both terrifying and strangely comforting. Aaron's tools sparked again. He shaped a small device, crude, unfinished, but alive with possibility. He imagined connecting it to the cub's failing lungs, letting it breathe not with what nature gave, but with what human hands created. He looked back at the cub. Its chest rose faintly, then stopped for a moment too long. Panic surged through him. He dropped his tools, rushing back to its side. "No, no, no!" he cried, pressing his hands gently against its chest. "Breathe. Please, breathe." The cub coughed once, weakly, then gasped. Relief flooded Aaron, but it was thin, temporary. The clock was still ticking. Aaron's jaw tightened. "I can't just treat you. I have to change the rules. If your lungs can't work, I'll give you new ones." He looked at the half-built machine in his hands, its wires glowing faintly in the lantern light. It was madness. If it failed, the cub would die instantly. But if it worked? Aaron raised his eyes to the mother dragon, her golden gaze burning into him through the glass. He held up the device in trembling hands. "This is it," he whispered. "This is your only chance." The cabin went silent except for the faint rasp of the cub's breath and the hum of Aaron's machine. The air felt heavy, like the world itself was waiting to see if a human could do the impossible. The cabin looked like a storm had torn through it. Tables were overturned, tools scattered across the floor, wires dangling like vines. In the center of it all, Aaron worked with a kind of desperate madness. His sleeves were rolled up, his hands blackened with grease and burns, his eyes bloodshot from sleepless hours. The cub lay on the blanket near the fire, every breath slower than the last, every gasp a reminder that time was running out. Outside, the mother dragon crouched like a living mountain, her wings folded tightly, her golden eyes fixed on the cabin. She had not moved for hours. Every time the cub wheezed, her claws dug into the earth. Every time its chest stuttered, she pressed closer to the window, fogging the glass with her hot breath. She was waiting, but Aaron knew. If he failed, her waiting would turn into fury. He bent over his makeshift workbench. Sparks hissed as he welded two pieces of metal together, the glow flashing across his strained face. On the bench sat the beginnings of something no human had ever tried to build before, artificial lungs designed not for man, but for a dragon. Aaron had scavenged everything he could find. A broken air purifier, a water filter, the synthetic membranes from his old experiments, a tiny pump from a drone engine, wires twisted into strange new shapes. None of it was meant to work together, but desperation had a way of forcing miracles. "Human lungs push air in and out," he muttered to himself, his voice hoarse. "But this little one's lungs, they're collapsing. I need something stronger, something that breathes for it." His mind raced through diagrams. He sketched on scraps of paper, lines crossing over each other until the page looked more like madness than science. A filtration chamber here, a pump system there, a flexible membrane that could expand and contract like living tissue. The cub coughed weakly behind him and Aaron froze. He dropped the pen, spinning around. The tiny dragon gasped, its chest sinking almost flat before rising again in a painful, broken rhythm. Aaron knelt quickly, placing a trembling hand on its side. "Not yet," he whispered, his throat tight. "You're not leaving yet." He looked up at the window. The mother dragon's golden eye filled the frame, staring at him with something he could only describe as trust. She couldn't understand his tools, his science, his frantic muttering, but she understood his intent. She was giving him her child, and with it, her faith. That was enough to drive him back to the bench with renewed fury. Aaron picked up the half-built device, adjusting the membranes with careful fingers. The machine was small, crude, but in his mind it became something more. A bridge between two worlds, a chance for life where none should exist. He heated the pump, soldered wires, stitched the synthetic tissue together until it resembled something that could breathe. His hands shook not from fear anymore, but from exhaustion. He hadn't slept. He hadn't eaten. His world had shrunk to the size of that table and the fragile life gasping behind him. Finally, he held up the device. It pulsed faintly in his hands, the tiny pump whirring, the membranes expanding and contracting like a beating heart. It was imperfect, fragile, dangerous, but alive. Aaron swallowed hard. This was it. No more building. No more testing. The cub didn't have time for perfection. He turned to the blanket where the small dragon lay. Its chest rose once, twice, then barely moved at all. Aaron's own heart slammed in his chest. He knelt, holding the device above the tiny body, his hands trembling. "If this fails," he whispered, his voice breaking. "No, it won't fail. It can't." The mother dragon shifted outside, her shadow falling over him like a cloak. Her massive head lowered, her eye pressed close to the window. She was waiting for him to act. Aaron took a deep breath and set the device against the cub's side. His fingers moved quickly, attaching tubes, adjusting straps, aligning the fragile machine with the little lungs beneath. "Come on," he whispered, his voice shaking with urgency. "Take it, breathe with me." For a moment, nothing happened. The cub's chest stayed still, the room suffocating in silence. Aaron's own breath hitched, fear crashing over him like a wave. Had he failed? Had he built a coffin instead of lungs? Then softly, slowly, the machine hissed. The membranes expanded. The pump clicked, and the cub's chest rose. Aaron froze, staring. The chest fell. The device whirred again. The chest rose once more, this time stronger. The little dragon coughed, then inhaled a deep, full breath, the sound sharp and alive. Aaron's eyes filled with tears. His trembling hands clutched the device as if he were holding the world itself. Outside, the mother dragon released a roar that shook the mountains, not of rage but of joy so powerful it rattled the earth. She reared back, wings spreading wide, fire bursting into the night sky. Aaron sagged to his knees, exhausted, his heart pounding with disbelief. He had done it. Against every law, every limit, every rule of nature, he had built lungs for a dragon. And as the cub breathed steadily, the glow of its tiny scales returning, Aaron realized with chilling clarity, the galaxy would never forgive this. The cabin was so quiet, Aaron could hear the blood rushing in his ears. The only sound breaking that silence was the faint hiss of the machine and the tiny, uneven rhythm of the cub's new breath. For a moment, he didn't dare move. His hands hovered above the little dragon as if even a touch might shatter the fragile miracle he had created. The cub's chest rose again, this time fuller, smoother. The glow along its scales flickered weakly, like embers in dying fire stirred back to life. Aaron's throat tightened. He had been preparing himself for failure, for the heavy silence that would follow when the cub's chest stopped forever. But this wasn't silence. This was breath. He leaned closer, hardly believing what he saw. The machine's membranes flexed in perfect rhythm, pumping air through the tubes and into the cub's failing lungs. The creature coughed once, a sharp sound that made Aaron flinch. Then, with a small shudder, it drew in another breath, stronger than the last. Aaron's lips trembled. A laugh almost escaped him, but it caught in his chest, turning into something closer to a sob. He pressed a hand over his mouth, eyes stinging. "You're breathing," he whispered. "You're actually breathing." Outside, the mother dragon seemed to sense it before Aaron even spoke. Her head jerked up, her eyes blazing brighter than the fire she carried inside. She pressed her enormous snout to the window, fogging the glass with a roar that shook the cabin's walls. But this roar wasn't rage, it was joy, raw and thunderous. She spread her wings, shaking dust from the earth, and lifted her head to the sky. A stream of fire tore across the night, not as a weapon, but as a cry of triumph. Flames licked the stars, painting the darkness with burning gold. The sound echoed through the mountains like a hymn of victory. Aaron fell back into his chair, drained. His body felt like lead, his hands still trembling from hours of frantic work. He could barely comprehend it. A human man in a broken cabin, building a machine from scraps, and now a dragon cub lived because of it. He turned his eyes to the window. The mother dragon looked back at him, her golden gaze softer now, heavy with gratitude. She lowered her head, bowing it until her massive jaw touched the dirt. For a beast that could level cities, it was the most humbling gesture he had ever seen. Aaron swallowed hard, his chest tight. He wanted to smile, but fear crept in alongside the joy. His communicator on the desk crackled suddenly, the static hissing like a snake. Aaron stiffened. He reached for it with a trembling hand, lifting the small device. The screen flickered to life and a cold mechanical voice filled the room. "Unauthorized interference detected," it said. "Human designation Dr. Aaron Vale. You have violated the non-intervention code." Aaron's stomach dropped. The words felt like ice water down his spine. His eyes darted to the cub, its chest rising peacefully now, and then to the massive shadow of the mother dragon crouched outside. He knew what this meant. His act of compassion had not gone unseen. The voice continued, calm and merciless. "You have 36 hours to surrender yourself to galactic enforcement. Punishment for violation erasure." The communicator went silent with a sharp click. The cabin seemed to shrink around him. Aaron sat frozen, the weight of the words crushing down on him. He looked back at the cub, alive because of him, and at the mother dragon who stared at him with trust and hope so deep it pierced through his fear. For the first time, Aaron realized the scale of what he had done. He hadn't just saved a life. He had broken a law older than his civilization, a law the galaxy enforced with iron teeth. And yet, as the cub stirred weakly and let out a soft, living squeak, Aaron felt something stronger than dread rise in him. He touched its tiny head gently, whispering, "I don't regret it. Not for this." The mother dragon's low, rumbling breath vibrated through the cabin walls like a vow shared in silence. The cub was alive, but the galaxy was already coming for him. The sky above the mountains cracked open with light. At first Aaron thought it was dawn, but the sun was still far below the horizon. No, this was different. Cold silver streaks burned across the night, carving lines through the stars. His stomach dropped. He knew that glow. Enforcement ships. The cabin shook as the first craft descended. Its hull gleamed like a blade, smooth and merciless, with the symbol of galactic law pulsing along its side. A sound like a horn rolled through the valley, low and final, a sound that meant judgment. Aaron stood frozen in the doorway, the cold wind tearing at his clothes. Behind him the cub stirred weakly, the machine still hissing with every breath. Outside, the mother dragon raised her head, her golden eyes narrowing. Her body tensed like a drawn bow. The ship landed in the clearing, its legs sinking into the dirt. A door slid open, spilling out white light so bright it washed the world in silver. Figures stepped forward, tall, armored enforcers, their faces hidden behind mirrored masks. Their voices were amplified, cold, echoing through the valley. Human designation, Dr. Aaron Vale. Step forward. Aaron's breath caught in his throat. He felt every muscle in his body scream to run, but his feet held fast. He knew what they wanted. Not just him. Not just surrender. They wanted the cub. The lead enforcer raised a hand and the voice thundered again. "You have violated the non-intervention code. The alien creature you have assisted must be surrendered for termination. Step aside." The words stabbed through Aaron's chest. Termination. They weren't here for justice, they were here to erase the evidence. To erase the life he had fought so hard to save. The mother dragon shifted, her massive wings unfolding slightly, a low growl building in her throat. Fire shimmered between her teeth, lighting the ground in orange glow. The enforcers didn't flinch. Their weapons rose in perfect unison, humming with blue light. Aaron's heart pounded. He turned back toward the cabin. The cub lay there, chest rising steadily with the help of his machine. Alive, fragile, innocent, and the law wanted it dead. He stepped out into the clearing, his fists clenched, his voice breaking but loud enough to carry. "You'll have to go through me first." The enforcers paused, their weapons steady but aimed. The leader tilted his head. "You would stand against galactic law. For a beast?" Aaron swallowed hard, forcing down the fear clawing at his throat. He raised his voice again. "Not for a beast, for a child." The mother dragon let out a roar that split the night, shaking trees from their roots. Fire exploded upward, painting the sky in molten light. The enforcers staggered back for the first time, their mirrored helmets reflecting the blaze. Weapons clicked louder. Blue energy gathered at their barrels, humming with the promise of destruction. Aaron moved closer to the dragon, standing beneath her shadow, his body so small beside hers, he looked like an ant beside a mountain. But in that moment, he didn't feel small. He felt unbreakable. He raised his voice again, shaking but strong. "If you want them, you'll have to kill me too." The clearing froze in tension. The hiss of weapons, the growl of the dragon, the pounding of Aaron's heart, all braided into one breathless silence. The cub whimpered inside the cabin, a soft sound that cut sharper than any blade. The mother dragon lowered her head beside Aaron, her golden eye locking with his. She didn't need words. She was telling him the same thing he felt in his bones. We stand together. The lead enforcer lifted a hand. Then you leave us no choice. Energy built bright enough to blind. The air vibrated with power. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath. Aaron clenched his fists, firelight gleaming in his eyes. He had saved a life once tonight. Now he would fight to keep it. And for the first time in his life, he wasn't afraid of the law. The clearing glowed like a battlefield waiting for its first strike. Silver-armored enforcers stood in perfect lines, their weapons humming, the light so sharp it burned shadows into the ground. On the other side, the mother dragon loomed above Aaron, wings half open, her chest glowing with fire she was ready to unleash. Between them, Aaron stood alone, small against giants, his fists trembling but his stance unshaken. For a heartbeat, no one moved. The air itself seemed to stop, heavy with choice. Then the cub whimpered inside the cabin, soft, weak, but alive. The sound cut through everything. It wasn't the cry of a monster. It wasn't a threat. It was just a child, breathing for the first time without pain. The mother dragon's growl softened, her head tilting toward the cabin. Even the enforcers hesitated. They had expected rage, destruction, a battle to justify their weapons. But what they saw instead was a dying cub, breathing with the help of a crude machine built by human hands. Aaron stepped forward, his voice hoarse but steady. Look at it. Look closely. Does this look like an enemy to you? Or does it look like what it truly is, a child who is dying? The leader of the enforcers tilted his head slightly, the mirrored mask reflecting the fire in the dragon's throat. His voice came out like iron. The law is clear. Intervention changes the balance. It cannot be allowed. Aaron shook his head, his chest rising with a surge of defiance. The law was written to stop cruelty, to stop domination. But this, he pointed toward the cabin, this is compassion. This is survival. This is life. The mother dragon lowered her massive head until it was beside Aaron. For the first time she bowed, her golden eye locking with his. It was a gesture of trust, of unity. A dragon and a human, standing together against the galaxy's cold code. Gasps rippled through the enforcers. Even their rigid masks seemed to tremble as they witnessed it. No record in their vast archives showed a dragon bowing to a human. The leader raised a hand to signal the strike, but then stopped. The cub cried again, louder this time, its tiny lungs pulling air through the machine Aaron had built. The sound was fragile but clear, alive, defiant. For the first time, the enforcers hesitated, their weapons lowered slightly. The leader's voice, though still cold, had a trace of something else, uncertainty. You risk everything. Your life, your world standing. For this? Aaron met the reflective mask without flinching. His voice shook, but every word cut like steel. Yes, because if saving a child is a crime, then maybe your law is broken. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. The mother dragon's fire dimmed, her growl fading into a low rumble of agreement. Slowly, the enforcers lowered their weapons. The leader stood still for a long moment, then spoke, his voice quieter, almost human. The galaxy will remember this. You have bent the law, but perhaps you have reminded us why laws exist at all. With that, the silver figures stepped back, retreating toward their ship. The engines roared to life, silver light spilling across the clearing as the craft lifted into the night. One final warning echoed over the valley. You are marked, human. The code has been broken, but so has history. We will be watching. The ship vanished into the stars, leaving only the silence of the mountain and the soft hiss of the machine inside the cabin. Aaron sank to his knees, exhaustion flooding through him. The mother dragon bent her head low, her golden eyes soft with something beyond gratitude, something like reverence. She nudged him gently with her massive snout, a gesture of kinship. Aaron turned to the cabin. The cub lay there, chest rising and falling in steady rhythm. Alive, stronger, a new future breathing in fragile lungs. He reached out and touched its tiny head, his voice breaking into a whisper meant only for it. Maybe this is how peace begins. And in that moment between man, dragon, and child, the night no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like the start of something greater than any law. The valley was quiet again, but it was not the same silence as before. This silence was alive, filled with the steady rhythm of the cub's breathing, with the low rumble of the mother dragon's chest, with Aaron's own exhausted heartbeat. The danger had passed, but the weight of what had happened pressed down on him heavier than ever. He stepped back inside the cabin. The machine hummed softly, its small lights glowing, the lungs he had built rising and falling with the cub's chest. The little dragon's scales, once dull, now shimmered faintly like embers beginning to glow again. It opened its eyes for the first time, golden like its mother's. They blinked slowly, weak but aware, and fixed on Aaron. Aaron froze. For a long moment, the world seemed to stop. Then, in a voice too small to be more than a squeak, the cub let out a sound. It wasn't words, but it was recognition. It saw him, not as a stranger, not as an enemy, but as something else. Outside, the mother dragon gave a low cry, softer than any roar he had ever heard. It was almost a song filled with gratitude and relief. She pressed her snout gently against the side of the cabin, shaking the wooden walls but with no malice, only affection. Aaron's throat tightened. He reached down, brushing his hand gently over the cub's head. "You're safe now," he whispered. "Breathe, live, grow strong." But as he said the words, his eyes flicked toward the communicator lying on the desk. The enforcers were gone but not defeated. Their warning still echoed in his mind. "You are marked, human. We will be watching." He picked it up, staring at its dark screen. His heart was heavy. He knew what it meant. From this night forward, he was no longer just a man in the mountains. He was a fugitive, a symbol, maybe even a threat. The galaxy would not forgive him for breaking their law. But would they forgive him for showing something greater? The cub coughed once, then inhaled deeply, its breath strong and clean. The machine clicked in rhythm, the fragile bridge between human invention and dragon life. And in that sound, Aaron felt something shift inside him. Fear was still there, yes, but so was pride. So was purpose. The mother dragon turned her golden eyes toward him, her gaze deep as the stars. She bowed her massive head, not just in thanks, but in a vow. She would remember. Her kind would remember. Perhaps one day all of them would. Aaron looked back at the cub, then at the dragon, then at the sky where the silver ships had vanished. The night seemed endless, full of stars and questions. He had no answers yet, only a truth that burned in his chest. Tonight had changed everything. He whispered into the silence, his words carried by the wind, by the fire, by the living breath of the cub. Maybe this isn't the end of my story. Maybe this is the beginning of all of ours. The cub let out a soft, almost playful chirp, its tiny wings twitching as if it understood. The mother dragon spread her enormous wings, firelight catching along the edges, painting the valley in gold. For the first time, Aaron didn't feel alone under their shadow. Above him, the stars seemed to listen. Somewhere out there, the galaxy was waiting. But here, in this fragile moment, a new bond had been born. Between human hands, dragon hearts, and a future that no law could ever erase.